Welcome to the Achievement in Sales virtual mentoring series. Today's installment is on cold calling. Today we've got our Petite Queen co-founders, Tina.
Hello.
And myself, along with Rachel, our Director of Operations and Communications.
Hello.
So, Tina, would you like to get us started?
I would. Thank you, Lynn. So let's start first. What is cold calling, right? Cold calling, by definition, is making an unsolicited call to someone you've never talked with before, never met before, in an attempt to sell either goods or services. And if that's the old definition of cold calling, because anymore with social media and all of the things that are out there and available on the internet, it's really warm calling. And we can use this as an outbound strategy, a sales tactic, a way to create an opportunity to make an appointment or to introduce yourself in your products and services. And why do I say it's a warm call? But you do your research. You figure out who it is you want to call, what type of client or buyer you are wanting to look for. Who is your ideal candidate? And you can build this up. And as you're building up the parameters, perhaps it's a title, perhaps it's a vertical segment of the market, perhaps it's a manager or a C-level, but you're figuring out what that ideal candidate for you to talk with. What do they do? You've done your research. You also want to do research on the company that you're going to be calling. You use LinkedIn to see if there's anyone that you might know together, that there might be some way that you can say, oh, you know Lynn. You want to do all of your research up front so that when you do connect with this person and you make that connection, that it's you have a sense of familiarity immediately. It's where there's a sense of familiarity. So it's warm, it's inviting, but truly with everything that's out there that's available on both companies and individuals and positions, if you really take the time up front to understand who your ideal candidate is, what your ideal customer looks like, and then target in on those characteristics, do your research within the company, and get ready and prepare yourself for this warm calling. Rachel, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, thank you, Tina. I really like your warm calling idea here. So something that you're going to hear me come back to frequently during this presentation is the fact that for me, the idea of cold calling is terrifying. I've done it a lot. I haven't done it a lot, but I've done cold calling, and it is the scariest part of any job I've ever had for me. And I really like what you were saying, Tina, about using social media to find connections that you might have with that person, some kind of common ground, whether it be a person that you both know, or even if you're snooping on their social media, you might find just anything that you have in common that makes them feel a little bit more human and it's a little less scary. So I think that's really helpful. What do you think, Lynn? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, building upon this research foundation, it's really going to impact your success. So what Tina was pointing out on how to do that, in my mind, I look at this as it's part of a robust go-to-market strategy. Knowing your competitors, a market analysis, going through a SWOT exercise, understanding your positioning statement, and all of that enables you to do just what Tina was talking about, of focusing your attention on industries, organizations, and positions that will that are going to be most interested in your product or service. And following up on what Rachel said, finding that common ground is very helpful when you're having this warm call with the person you've never met and never talked to before. Right. Well, I think that's going to go into this next piece, and I'll go ahead and I'm going to pinch hit, perfect pitch
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a perfect pitch, this is really what we're talking about here is the elevator pitch. And an elevator pitch should be 60 seconds long. It needs to communicate your product or service, and it needs to leave your audience wanting more. So I'm going to give you an example of our initial pitch that we did for Petite Queen, our elevator pitch. We empower women at work and in life by providing uplifting content and ongoing conversations on practical wisdoms. So that's our example of what our initial elevator pitch was, and you can see how we incorporated what we do and why you're listening to us into our pitch, and really focusing on what we do as a company and what we're trying to achieve, what our mission is, what's our market position, and what differentiates ourselves. So a good elevator pitch is born from that market positioning strategy. It's your guide for communicating how you fit in the marketplace. And once you have this great pitch, and you rehearse it a few times, but you don't need to memorize it. Please don't. It needs to be natural. Your next step is really to anticipate questions, because where you want to be is that you want someone to come back and say, tell me more. Or exactly how do you compare to XYZ? So you want them to ask you questions. And you want to anticipate those, but you do not want canned answers. I want to say this really, no, 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 no. Do not follow a rigid script, please. Don't do that. But you still need to know what type of questions that they're going to ask you, so that you've had time to think about it and to know how you're going to respond. So the last piece I want to talk about with the perfect pitch is flexibility, because professional sales is about building relationships, listening, and providing solutions. For me personally, sales is about helping people. And you have to listen to be able to help. And that takes us to, you must be flexible and follow where the conversation develops. And that's, my point about flexibility. That's where I see it. And I'm going to skip to Tina, and I'd like to hear what you think about a perfect pitch.
Well, thank you, Lynn. So, I see this as establishing trust. When we're first talking with an individual and warm or warmer, however that connection is, we may have said our elevator pitch, as you call it, Lynn. We may have said an elevator pitch 50 times, and it becomes just rote to us. But that's the first time that individual has ever heard it. So it has to be delivered. It has to be shared with the same enthusiasm as the very first time on the 50th time, right? And we have to be flexible in that if you're going off of a script, and then the individual on the other end of the line says, well, wait a minute, how does that apply to me? And you haven't figured out or anticipated what kind of questions might come in on that, you're going to get completely floundered and stuck. And then it's going to look like exactly what it is, a canned speech. You need to be able to pivot in a conversation at all times, and be prepared that at any time someone, and they may even say at that point, I'm not interested. And then what? Well, I still have 3 more sentences I need to say, so you're going to talk over them. But that's an opportunity to say, really, why? And start that conversation. Be flexible, and realize that, and much like giving a speech, you're the only person in the room that knows it better than anybody else. You're the only one that knows your pitch better than anyone, and you know exactly why you have selected this individual to talk with. There was a reason, because you did your research. There's a reason for doing that, and there's something there to hopefully to create a connection. Rachel?
Right. I'm going to speak to the anticipating questions part just very briefly. I think that anticipating the kinds of questions that you'll be faced with is incredibly important because you don't want to be stuck. I find that if I'm asked a question that I really don't expect for the first time, I talk in circles for a while until I finally find the answer that they're looking for, and nobody wants to listen to you ramble like that. So something that everyone should make sure that they do is that they think of their own questions that someone might ask them, but then have perhaps a coworker ask you some more questions that you hadn't thought of, and then ask someone like a friend or someone who has no idea about this industry, or maybe some idea, but who's not an insider in your business, and see what kinds of questions they might ask, because they probably won't be the same questions that the people within your company would ask. So be good about anticipating all kinds of questions. And I believe, Tina, you're going to be taking the next slide. So
I am indeed. So we've done our research and we have our perfect pitch. We're ready for whatever questions may come up. We know that we may need to go off of our script somehow. So now we're ready. We're ready to make that call. And again, we are the ones that are initiating the call. The person that initiates the call, you're in charge. You've made the decision that this is the right call to make. You want to make a connection with this person. You want to be excited about it. And Lynn mentions this constantly. You want to smile when you're talking. It resonates through the phone if you're smiling, if you're excited about what you're calling them about. That permeates the telephone lines. And you want to be able to, you're prepared, and you want to start a conversation with the individuals. You're building trust, and you are establishing that you know something about their industry and their position. And what you have to offer is going to be something that's either going to make their life easier or better or stronger, and that's the excitement about making a sales call. Because you really don't know how all of this is going to end up, but you know that you're on a new adventure with the individual on the other end of the line. Rachel?
Tina, I really like your point about reminding yourself that you're the person in charge, because as I've already mentioned, and I'm going to mention again, cold calling terrifies me. And
warm calling.
Warm calling is also scary.
Yes.
But remembering that you're in charge, I think, is really helpful, that you're the one initiating this, and you're the one who's beginning a conversation, and you're not just there to like speak at them and then hope that they say yes. It's more of a two-way street than that. And I think it's really important to remember that you are initiating this conversation because you want to talk to them. And I think that's really helpful.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I was going to mention something that as you're getting yourself organized to make this call, and you have to determine the right time to make the call as well. And usually, either early in the morning or later at night or later in the afternoon is really a good time. And again, that's you being in charge. You are in charge of the time of day that you're calling and what your expectations are. I talked right over you, Rachel. I apologize.
No, I was just going to hand it off to Lynn and see what she has to say about this. I know she likes to smile.
Oh, yes, she does.
Oh, my goodness. So everything that you said is right. And another key part is to take a breath and listen. Pause. Pauses are powerful. Listen to the other person. You can sense in their tone of voice. Sometimes they're in the middle of something and you can just tell. And it's like, would this afternoon at 3 p.m. or tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific be better for me to call back? Just say, hey, it sounds like you've got your hands full. Would, and give them a time. Don't just say, can I call you back? Don't ever use the weak can, but instead give them an option about when you can call them back, so that you've got the permission to call them back, and then start your cold call again. So I think that's really important because what you're trying to do, or not trying, but you must do, is to build that relational capital. So, and that's building the relationship. So let's go on to this next piece.
Great segue.
Yeah, exactly, to our organic conversation. And I was just talking about active listening because I just said it. It's about building relational capital. And you do that by being authentic, establishing credibility and integrity. And you need to ask questions that demonstrate your worthy intent, that you're really interested in them, that you're interested in who they are as a person. You're not just after to close a sale. You know, you want to build this relationship with this individual. And so an example of that would be, what do you enjoy doing when you're not working? You know, so that's something where I could ask Tina, what do you enjoy doing when you're not working? Okay, it wasn't meant to be rhetorical, but that's okay.
Okay.
But the idea is to get this organic conversation going and
Right.
to hear what they have to say to start establishing that relationship. And we've already talked a lot about flexibility and going where the conversation takes you and making that connection with that individual. So, Tina, this is a big part of what you do with the organic conversation. Love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So, I absolutely agree. This is the point where you are wanting to be tuned in to the other person on the other end of the line. A simple question: is this a good time? Not is this a bad time, but is this a good time? If not, and to your point, Lynn, be a specific. Would 10 o'clock Wednesday be better? Or be very specific about that. And it's so important, no distractions. Don't try to be doing double duty and multitasking when you're on a telephone call. If it is as if that person, you can imagine that person sitting in front of you or sitting next to you, not through the telephone lines where they don't see everything that you're doing. This is your time with that individual. Be respectful. Be very respectful of the cues, and if there's some hesitations, if you were sitting in front of someone and there was a hesitation, you might give a pause for a moment and then take a moment to ask a question as to, I noticed that there is some hesitation there. What's going on? Not what's going on, but it would be something more organic than that. Once again, always want to be flexible in the conversation and be able to shift gears as needed. And if you find that through the conversation that things are not connecting with this individual, perhaps, hey, maybe you might want to introduce me to someone else within your organization that would be a better fit for this particular, but I would love to continue, our conversation, see what other things we might be able to do together. But perhaps this particular product or service that we were talking about is a better fit for someplace else. Keep it very light and no heavy responsibility on that individual. Nobody likes to feel that they're pressured or have any heavy lifting that's been thrown upon them during an opening conversation. Rachel?
Yeah, I think that this slide is really important. So what I'm thinking about is when you encounter the antithesis of all of this. So I keep getting these phone calls where they're telling me that I've been selected for a cruise. Of course, it's a scam. But the thing is that it's just a wall of speech, because it's a robot, of course. It's just a wall of speech, and you don't get to say, no, stop calling me. This is a scam. Leave me alone. You don't even get to say, wow, golly gee, where does this cruise go? You don't get to ask any of these things because it's just a robot. And when you're in sales, you want to be making interpersonal connections because you are a person, and the person that you're speaking to is also a person, and you need to let them know that, because there's nothing more frustrating than just a wall of speech that you can't penetrate in any way. So I think that these tips, like listening and being ready for questions and those kinds of things, it's really important, because otherwise they just feel like they're listening to a robot telling them about a cruise.
Hopefully a cruise going somewhere exciting.
Right. For free.
Yeah, for free. With no strings attached, and they don't want your credit card over the phone just to reserve the the incidentals on it. Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, so here we are to the next one. When you are making these warm calls, you will encounter opportunities to leave a voicemail. And That's the way I look at it. It's an opportunity to leave a voicemail, and I plan what the voicemail I'm going to leave. Now, once again, you're not trying to do this, read a script or be scripted. I've already talked about that, but you still need to know what you want to say. And what's funny is that often when I'm making these types of calls, I am surprised when someone answers the phone and I get a real person on the line. I'm like, whoa, okay. So here are my top tips. Be clear and concise. I mean, get to the point. We've talked about that a lot. Make sure you've got a statement that requires some action and invites interest. So it should be a very brief voicemail so that they're not listening to it for days as you drone on. You want to get to the point and make it interesting and something that would entice them to return the call. Then at the end, that's when you leave your name and number. I mean, for me, I always leave my name and my number at the very end, because what I'm trying to do is get them interested in what I want to communicate to them, because I'm not calling them just to go fishing. I'm calling them because I believe they have a real need for our product or service, and I genuinely feel that we would make a positive impact for their organization. And because of that this is a message, this is something that they need to hear about. So they do need to be interested in it. But at the end, that's when I tell them who I am, slowly and concisely, and my phone number slowly and concisely. How many times have you gone through this voicemail and you're going, wow, I am interested, and all of a sudden they leave their phone number 6785-6702. Yeah, and you're going like, what the what? And you're having to listen to it 10 times to try to get the phone number because you actually wanted to call them back. You're not going, I mean, trust me, this is the worst possible thing, is to leave that number that fast. So I actually purposely slow down to leave the phone number, 800-888-2563. So that's really important when you're, in my mind, make sure you leave that name and number so that they can understand you and easily write it down. I know that Rachel, I'm going to go to Tina again because obviously she's left a lot of voicemails, and I'm skipping you. We'll come back.
Oh, I won't. I'll toss it to you, Rachel, when I'm done here. So Lynn and I have a differing opinions on voicemails. I think that I don't always leave a voicemail, particularly if I've never talked with a person before. But let's just say I am leaving a voicemail in this particular slide. I'm going to leave it's going to be clear and concise. It's going to be very specific. I'm going to give my name at the beginning of the voicemail, and I'm going to give my name at the end of the voicemail. I am going to give my telephone number at the end of the voicemail. I'm going to give it twice. Anytime I leave a voicemail, I always leave I say it twice. And it's just a habit that I've had from, I don't know how many years, number of years, for just that reason that Lynn was saying. If you cannot understand you can't grab their telephone number. If you can't be respectful enough to leave a number that I can write down, why in the heck should I give you a call back? So I always try to do that. And you never know where someone's going to be when they do receive your voicemail. If they're going to be driving in the car, they're going to be, on a bus or on the train, and maybe there's some other distractions. So that's what I like to do when I do leave a voicemail. Rachel?
Well, I'm glad I finally have my turn. Don't worry, I'm not bitter. I think that the point that both you, Tina, and Lynn are trying to make, regardless of whether you give your name at the beginning or just at the end, I think that's up to personal preference. But the point is to make it as easy as possible for the person you're calling to get interested and call you back. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about we don't want rambling because nobody wants to listen to a 2-minute voicemail. Just nobody has time for that. And, you want to make it interesting. So like, even if it's only 30 seconds, it might still feel like 2 minutes if it's really boring. But the most important thing is just like you said, your name and your number, you need to make it as easy as possible for them to want to call you back and to actually call you back. And so just think of it in those terms. It's an opportunity to make a new connection, and you want to make that easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
Yep. Okay, here we are. Style, be you. And we were just talking about whether you leave a voicemail or you don't leave a voicemail. I mean, that's part of
leave a voicemail or not, right?
Yeah, that's part of your style and your approach. And everyone, and there may be different circumstances where you may or may not, you may want to leave one and you may not. So we're not going to go there any further. And then another style is some individuals will call from anywhere. And other individuals like myself, I prefer to call when I'm actually in the office in front of my computer, so that when I do get them on the phone, I might be able to get that appointment scheduled right then and there, and I can be looking at my iCal so I can get everything scheduled, or answer any kind of specific questions, or go to a referral, or anything else that I need to do. So that's my personal preference, but many individuals, they don't have that luxury of being able to do that, or they would prefer to be calling from the car, or when they're on the road, they're in the airport, etc. I would say that if you are in an area that's like, you're just like, for me, okay, I'm just come out of Starbucks and there's people walking by, that's just really distracting for the person who's trying to listen to your voicemail or even to take your call, because there's all this outside noise. So I would be aware of that. Please be aware of your surroundings and be safe when you're in your car, for goodness sakes. Be cognizant of time. We've touched on this. If you leave some long rambling, almost like my dialogue right here and now, people are going to get really sick of it. And I mean, it's just like, oh, yikes, I don't want to have to call this person back. So you just get to the point, be cheerful, be pleasant, have something of interest for them. And this is one of the things we talked about, is asking permission when you get them on the phone. Ask for that permission to set a different time if they're not available, set an appointment, a follow-up time to call them, in-person meeting, whatever you're looking to get. Ask permission to talk to them if the time is convenient for them right then. And if it's not, then set a time that you can call them back. And I think my last closing statement on this is the style be you. And because this has come up a couple of times in the conversation, that, I can be really cheerful and, have that laugh in my voice. And that's part of who I am, and that's part of my style. And I think that's part of the package when you work with me. And so I think it's important that you be you, because that's part of that relational, value that you're bringing, that you're going to make this connection with someone. And remember, you're not always going to be able to be everybody's best friend or be able to work effectively with everyone. But knowing who you are and being able to make that connection, it's going to be easier if you are yourself and you're genuine. And that's what we've been talking about all the way through this presentation. And this time I'm going to ask Rachel, so she doesn't have to be bitter, and I won't be, trying to avoid her.
I'm never bitter.
So what do you think?
I don't have too much to add to this slide, actually. I just really like what you're going with, where, you do have to follow some guidelines. Don't be in a rock concert when you're trying to call someone, because they're not going to be able to understand you over the noise. And you do need to be safe, and you do need to be cognizant of what time you're calling. If you're calling them at 2 a.m. their time, don't expect them to answer. But overall, you should be genuine. We've talked about this a lot, that you're trying to make a connection, and it's hard to make a connection when you're being fake. So be yourself and be genuine, and be kind and pleasant and interesting. How about you, Tina?
Well, I don't have much to add. I think the two of you have covered off on most things. The more sincere an individual can be in person or on the phone, it comes through. Your authenticity comes through. And that is through the phone. That is one manner in which to develop a relationship, to start a conversation. And everything that you've done to this point has you, now you have an opportunity to just start a conversation, and that's really what it is. It's starting a conversation. And be yourself. It comes through. It comes through on the voicemail. It comes through on the first time you say hello. It comes through. And again, be short. Where do you say that, Lynn? Somewhere. Be short, be prompt, be done, or something like that.
I know. Be prepared, be brief,
prepared,
inspired, and be
done.
gone.
There you go. There you go. And you can take all of those things, and I can do that differently than Lynn, than Rachel. We all have our own style. And that's what makes sales so much fun, truly, is because there are so many different styles and different ways in which to communicate out there. This happens to be one in a tool chest of many. Lynn?
All right. Well, then I think we're about to say thank you to all our members and guests who joined us for this installment of Achievement in Sales virtual mentoring series, and being part of our dialogue here at Petite to Queen. If you have any questions or suggestions and for our topics for discussion that you'd like to present to us, please email us at jointheconversation@petitetoqueen.com.